Hello, everyone. I want to talk to you guys about something that is so dreadful and so horrific, and I'm actually surprised as to why not more people talk about this, and that is the suffering of Serbia. Serbia is a country that has suffered so much. It is surreal how much Serbia has suffered. You go back to World War I, when Serbia was invaded by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, by the Habsburgs, and was raped. Serbia was raped by the Habsburgs. Austria raped Serbia. And so many Serbs were killed because of Austria. And Austria, in fact, backed the Albanian Mujahideen against the Serbs. Austria backed an Albanian jihad, an Albanian Islamic holy war against the Serbs. And so many Serbs were killed. And in World War I, this is how bad it was. In World War I, over 50% of Serbia's male population was wiped out. Around 52% of Serbia's male population was wiped out. It is a horrifying thing to recognize, to realize how capricious and ruthless this world is. It brings about a feeling of dread to think about the fact that this world is capricious and that evil is all around and that life is not going to be guaranteed to be comfortable all the time. You may be massacred, you may be genocided, you may be pillaged, you may be invaded and slaughtered. The fact that over 50% of Serbia's male population was wiped out attests to the depressing reality of life. And then you have World War II. World War II. The Serbs were butchered by the Croatian fascists, known as the Ustasha. These were Croatian nationalists, and they were also fanatical trad Catholics. When the Ustasha rose up, their strongest supporters were the radical trad Catholics. The older generation was more suspicious, more they didn't really trust the Ustasha. They didn't really support the Ustasha as much as the young population did. The younger population consisted of a lot of radical traditionalist Catholics who believed that through the Ustasha they could have an independent Croatia, that they could have a Croatia that was free of other peoples, Gypsies, Jews, especially Serbs, and they believed that they could advance Catholicism by forcefully converting Serbs to the Catholic religion. And about 1/3 of Serbs were converted to Catholicism, of course, under the pain of death, under the threat of death. And what's sad is that they were Serbs who converted to Catholicism, and they were murdered anyway. They were murdered anyway. And Serbs who refused to convert to Catholicism were brought to concentration camps. The biggest, most notorious Croatian concentration camp was the Jasenovac camp. And so many people were killed in this camp. In total, the Ustasha, from what I have read, they slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people, mainly Serbs. Mainly Serbs. And I want to read to you guys about some of the evils of the Ustasha in light of their radical nationalistic trad Catholicism. It says here that there was one cleric by the name of Dionysius Jurichev, and he wrote that to kill children at least 7 years of age was not a sin. And this is why the Ustasha, they didn't hesitate to kill children. I mean, it explains the insanity, really. It also reflects the insanity. It reflects the insanity. And maybe this is what happens when you get so high off of your own traditionalism, you become so high off of your own hubris, your own sense of grandeur. You think that you're superior to other people. And yes, this thing does exist. There was another Croatian priest, his name was Mate Mugos, and he wrote that clergy should put down the prayer book and take up the revolver. I mean, the insanity is, it's so blatant. Ivan Saric, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Verbozna in Sarajevo, supported the Ustasha, in particular the forcible conversion of Orthodox Serbs to Roman Catholicism. His diocesan newspaper wrote, quote, "There is a limit to love." There is a limit to love, guys. I mean, yes, Jesus Christ died for the world, but there's a limit to love. Yes, St. Paul said that you can do all these good things, but without love, it's pointless. But hey, forget all that. Throw all that out the window. There is a limit to love. This is what Ivan Saric said. He also said, his newspaper at least said, the movement of liberation of the world from the Jews is a movement for the renewal of, my favorite Catholic term, human dignity. So in the name of, for the cause of killing people, Serbs, Jews, etc., people you don't like, we will advance human dignity. This is the exact term that Pope Francis uses when he defends serial killers and child rapists. This is the exact term that Pope Francis uses when he goes against the death penalty. Because in America, we have the death penalty for the most egregious of criminals, people who have done mass murder and child rapists, etc. And the Pope comes out and defends them and says we need to abolish the death penalty globally. And Pope Francis came to the United States and made a speech before Congress declaring that the death penalty is against human dignity and that it must be abolished worldwide. And everybody clapped their hands. And in the name of human dignity, the worst of the worst are defended. The worst of the worst are defended. And according to Ivan Saric, in the name of human dignity, people have to be killed for the Ustasha Croatian nationalist cause. Human dignity, everybody. Then there was a guy, his name was Archbishop Stepinac. Very, very, very famous. He, in fact, is extremely well known in the Croatian Catholic world. And his name was Aloysius Stepinac. Aloysius Stepinac. It says here that that Stepinac had allowed state papers from the Ustasha to be stored in his episcopal residence. Papers crucial to the Ustasha and retaking control of the country, and which contained volumes of incriminating information against Ustasha war criminals. So this guy hid documents in his episcopal residence that would have exposed these Ustasha members as war criminals. Stepinac was transferred back home to the village of Krasic in 1953 and died in his residence 7 years later. In 1998, get this, everybody. In 1998, John Paul II beatified him. So this guy got beatified, even though he was covering up for mass murderers. Why am I not surprised? Who else does the Catholic Church cover up? It cover-ups for pedophiles and sexual predators, and it will go out of its way to defend mass murderers and say, don't kill them because we need the love of God. And yet it will beatify someone who has blood on his hands like Stepinac. Oh, I remember not too long ago hearing about a guy, I think it was in Tennessee, went into a woman's house, tied up the mother and daughter, tortured them for hours, raped the daughter, murdered both of them, and he was executed. He was executed, and before his execution, the Catholic Church came to his defense and said, don't kill this man in the name of human dignity. Don't kill this man. They will defend murderers and they will cover up for child predators and pedophiles, and they will also beatify someone like Stepanach, who covered up for mass murderers. Is there a pattern here? Obviously, there's a pattern, okay, being seen here. It's not that difficult to see. It's not that difficult to see. And it's amazing. Like, and what got me to start reading this history was, well, I've been reading this type of history for a while, but specifically the involvement of the clergy, the Croatian clergy, in the mass murdering policies of the Ustasha, was the responses that I have gotten from people in regards to my article on Thomas Aquinas. We wrote this article recently. It took us a while to write it out because it requires a lot of reading and thinking, and the article was about Thomas Aquinas. And Thomas Aquinas said that things like the sins of Sodom, bestiality, cannibalism, these things can be natural for some individuals. It can be natural for some individuals. And people were saying Thomas Aquinas didn't really mean that, because he also said that homosexuality is against nature, etc. And my argument to this is, so what? So what? Pope Francis said that gay marriage is of the Antichrist. Yeah, Pope Francis said this. But he also said that he's in favor of civil unions. So there's a contradiction here. And when you're looking at what people are, when you're looking at deception, right? I'm trying to phrase this correctly. When you're looking at deception, you have to look at the leaven, not the flour and the water. When you're making bread, you have the yeast, the flour, and the water. And St. Paul said it. He said, a little bit of leaven leavens the entire batch. You guys are looking at the batch. I'm looking at the leaven. You guys are looking at the giant sacks of corn, and I'm looking at the little bit of mold that has started to infect the corn, and I know very well that it's going to take over all of the corn. But you guys are saying, no, the corn is good. Let's just keep shipping the corn. Put the corn in the grocery stores. Have people buy it. Well, there's a little bit of mold here. Yeah, but there's just a little bit of mold here. I mean, the rest of this is good corn. Yeah, it's good corn, but there's a little bit of mold there. And you don't know how much of that mold is going to spread to the rest of the corn. You got to dump it out. There's some mold in the house. Yeah, but it's just a little bit. I mean, the rest of the house is clean. Yeah, the rest of the house is clean, but there's mold in the house. There's something wrong. Something needs to be done. Catechism says that homosexuality is a disorder. It says that it's a disorder. But also, you have the Vatican saying that the sin of Sodom, the evil of Sodom, can in fact be something of instinct. That something is of, when you say something is of instinct, you're saying that it's natural. And this is how the devil gets through the cracks. This is how the fox gets into the henhouse. These little tiny openings. People think, this is the problem with people. People don't really think about these things until the entire thing is taken over. Then they're like, oh, wow, how did this happen? But before that, they're like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. No evil here. A little bit of poison, a little bit of cyanide, just a little bit of evil, just a little drop of it. Oh, it's not a big deal. He still says the rest of what he says is still good. But there's that little bit of poison. There's that little bit of leaven. And once you accept it, then it can be expanded. And that Overton window can be widened just by a little bit. Just by a little bit. And this is how these things always work. Evil ideologues always work by incrementalism. They don't just go out and blah. The ones that do don't make it anywhere. They don't advance in any way. They don't succeed. It's the incrementalists that succeed. A little bit of incrementalism, little by little, small advances. That's how these people spread. That's how they advance themselves. And when you look at the Vatican, That's how it's starting out. Well, it's an orientation. They are Catholics who teach this. It's an orientation. It can't be something of instinct. And then you have people in the Vatican who say, the Vatican will say, oh, we really don't know where it comes from. Oh, we don't know where it comes from, but the Bible says it comes from rejecting God. We're not entirely sure where it comes from. It's deep-seated. That's what the Catechism says. It's deep-seated. It's all ways to get people to slowly tolerate and embrace Sodom. That's what this is about. And you know what? They have succeeded in so many ways. In so many ways, they have advanced their agenda. The fact that so many priests are citizens of Sodom, the fact that you have the Pope saying that we need civil unions, the fact that you see so many stories of pedophiles being shipped around and protected within the Vatican. I've literally seen this evil myself, everybody. I've literally seen it, okay? There was a priest that I knew, Father Robert L. Kinsel, who was going around preaching the religion of Sodom, and I was telling the people say, go to the bishop. When you see a problem, just go to the bishop, go to the bishop, go to the bishop, go to the bishop. I went to the bishop. I got a call from some of the officials of the bishop. I had a meeting with 2 officials from the bishop. We talked for 2.5 hours. Do you know what their conclusion was? There's nothing we can do about it because the decision to remove this priest can only come from the Pope. Him being removed is something that can only be determined by the bloody Pope up in the Vatican in Italy, in a completely different country. So all this nonsense about go to the bishop, it's all bullshit, everybody. It's all a bunch of bullshit. It's not true. It's a lie. And there's so much dishonesty. I hate oh, God. I sound like a Protestant when I talk this way, but I'm not a Protestant, okay? I'm just very, very angry about this stuff. There's so much dishonesty in the Vatican. There's so much evil and lying and dishonesty in the Catholic Church. So much of it. And I spoke with a Monsignor who was overseeing this priest's activities in his church because he was working at this Monsignor's church, and I told them, because I found out that this priest Robert L. Kinsel, he was covering up for a convicted pedophile by the name of Robert Hirdlicka. Robert Hirdlicka was also a priest who was convicted of child molestation. He was sentenced to several years in prison, and Robert L. Kinsel begged the authorities not to put him in prison. And I brought this up, and I told the Monsignor about it, and he said, well, I'm going to go talk to Kinsel. And he talked to him. Then he called me up, basically giving me a tongue lashing, giving me a verbal lashing about why are you bringing up this subject? Why are you doing this? Yada, 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 yelling at me, giving me a verbal lashing. And then I said to him, did you bring up the fact that he covered up for a pedophile named Robert Hirdlicka? He said, I didn't even bring it up. That was his response to me. I didn't even bring it up. And then he hung up the phone on my face. Not immediately after he said that, but some moments later, he hung up the phone on my face. This was the treatment that I got from the Catholic Church. This was the treatment. So I realized going to the bishops is bullshit. That's a lie. There's dishonesty being done to cover up the evildoers. And then I heard about another priest who was a sexual predator by the name of Michael Yarbrough. This guy asked me if I wanted to hang out with him in his office. I Googled his name. I found this story that he invited a young man to his office and then sexually assaulted him. So it's like if a rapist, it's like if some guy goes to a lady and says, hey, would you like to have dinner with me? And she's like, well, yeah, sure. Let me see my schedule or something. And then she Googles the guy and she finds a mugshot. And the mugshot document, the mugshot page says that this guy was in prison for some time for rape or sexual assault. I mean, would you go out to dinner with him? Hell no. But you would still think in your mind that the guy was preying on you. That would be the logical conclusion. So I called him up and I said, yeah, let's meet. And he said, let's meet in my office. I said, no, I can't, because I knew that the guy was going to try to assault me. So we went to this cafe. I confronted him. I brought up his evils. I brought up the fact that he committed sexual assault. He gets up and starts to run away. Now, that's not surprising, right? We expect that this guy is going to run away. The most shocking part of this story is that when I uploaded the video, I got hundreds of comments from Catholics condemning me. That was the most disturbing part. I mean, this guy's a predator. We can expect nothing good from him, right? So we shouldn't be shocked that he's running away. We shouldn't be shocked that he's preying on people. It's all expected. That's not surprising. What's surprising is the fact that I got hundreds of comments from Catholics condemning me. And even one person told me that I should commit suicide. These are your nice Catholics who believe in human dignity and would defend Ted Bundy from being executed by the state. It's sickening, guys. The whole damn thing is rotten. There's so much rot in it. It's ridiculous. It's come to the point where you have nuns who are involved in witchcraft and they roam around freely. Nobody really cares. It's gotten so bad, guys. It's gotten so bad that we have the Vatican saying that homosexuality can be something of instinct, something natural. And a lot of this stuff stems from Thomas Aquinas. You go back to Aquinas in his Summa Theologica, and he said that these evils, homosexuality, cannibalism, bestiality, these things can be natural for some individuals. There's the leaven. Yes, I understand the rest of what he says is true and orthodox, but there is the leaven. A truly, truly calculative person who's evil and insidious is not just going to come and say, yeah, here I am, I'm evil. He's going to mix truth with lies. Remember the scene from The Exorcist when the older priest is talking to the younger priest? It was Father Marin, talking to Father Karras, and the older priest tells the younger priest he will mix truth with lies to try to confuse us. The attack is psychological, Dimmy. I love that scene. It's a very good scene. The attack is psychological.
Especially important is the warning to avoid conversations with the demon. We may ask what is relevant, but anything beyond that is dangerous. He's a liar. The demon is a liar. He will like to confuse us. But he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us. The attack is psychological, Damien. And powerful. So don't listen. Remember that. Do not listen.
That's what this is. It's mixing truth with lies. And this is what the Vatican has done. It's mixed truth with lies. It will say things that are true, like, yeah, gay marriage is of the Antichrist. But then it'll say something that is completely cancerous and poisonous, like we need civil unions, which is gay marriage. It's right there, guys. It's literally right there. And, you have liberals who say, gay people are born that way. And then you have the Vatican who say, well, some of them are doing it out of instinct. Well, what's the difference? The difference is that one is more deceptive than the other. But ultimately, they agree. Ultimately, they are in agreement. And it's become pharisaical. The whole thing. It's become the Catholic Church has become Talmudist. It really has become Talmudic. What is Talmudism, right? Talmudism is when you go to the Talmud, which is the interpretation of the Torah, and you pretty much rely on the Talmud. Well, what does the Talmud say? The Talmud is the interpretation of the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, the 5 books of Moses. And what do a lot of Catholics do? They say, well, let's go to Aquinas. And then they argue amongst themselves over different interpretations of Aquinas, much like people will argue over different interpretations of the Bible. Well, the Bible says that. Catholics will argue over what Thomas Aquinas said. What did Thomas Aquinas say? So the Summa Theologica has become the Talmud. Let's argue over what the Summa says. Well, the Summa says that, and the Summa says this. What does it say in Latin? Let's argue over this. It's become very Talmudic. And when you start just relying so much on the intellect of a guy, and you see the sophistry, or you see the vagueness of it all, there's a lot of room for danger. Because Aquinas will say all the right things. Well, he'll say that it's unnatural or that it's against nature. But then he'll say, well, some of it is actually natural. Cannibalism can be natural. Bestiality can be natural. I mean, the most horrific of crimes, cannibalism, bestiality. I mean, this is serial killer stuff. And Thomas Aquinas says, well, it can be natural for some people. It can be natural for Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is an individual who had urges for eating human flesh. So I guess according to Aquinas, it was natural to him. Do you see how in the vagueness, how when you have truth but then lies, how evil can be supported, how it can be not exactly vindicated, but how it can be presented as something that can be true because somebody decided to interpret the Bible in a very vague way and say truth, but then say things that are destructive, and then people who are insidious can then take the destructive ideas and say, well, look, Thomas Aquinas advanced the religion of Sodom. And that's what a lot of Catholic theologians do. A lot of Catholic theologians who are of the persuasion of Father James Martin, this is what they do. And for those of you who disagree with me about Aquinas, well, the Vatican says that homosexuality can be something of instinct, which means it can be natural. So does the Vatican then agree with Thomas Aquinas when Aquinas says that it can be natural, cannibalism, bestiality, homosexuality, can be natural for certain individuals? If the Vatican disagrees with Aquinas, then Thomas Aquinas is saying something that contradicts the church. If they agree, then my perspective is correct, and that's exactly what Aquinas is arguing, that it can indeed be natural for certain individuals. And once you say that it can be natural, then the logical conclusion is that it should be tolerated. If you don't believe me, then all the people who don't believe me when I say this, well, don't complain when people call pedophilia an orientation. That's what these psychiatrists do. They come out and they say, oh, pedophilia, that's an orientation. It's natural. They can't prevent having these urges. And then the conservatives, Catholics, will say, this is crazy. But Aquinas says freaking cannibalism and homosexuality and can be natural. And the Vatican says that it can be natural. And you have Catholics saying it can be an orientation. So what's the freaking difference? And the reason why you get angry when the secular psychiatrists say that pedophilia is an orientation is because you know damn well what that leads to, that it leads to toleration of pedophilia. It's no different than the dangers that lie in what the Vatican is saying, the dangers that exist, the dangers that proceed from what the Vatican is saying. When you say it's deep-seated and you use these words like, it can be of instinct, or, it's incurable, or, it's, like I said, deep-seated. Once you start making those arguments, the inevitable result is Father James Martin. That's the result. The result is Sodom. Bottom line. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.